Hello! So today we'll be discussing The Grauballe Man by Seamus Heaney. So Grauballe man or men or these type of exhibits are seen at the British Museum, and they are typically sort of Iron Age men that were sacrificed, sometimes women as well, for religious reasons back in sort of 400 to 800 AD. And they are particularly special and captured the imagination of Seamus Heaney because they look so lifelike and like they're just about to wake up. So I will read it to you and then we will analyse. As if he had been poured in tar, he lies on a pillow of turf and seems to weep the black river of himself. The grain of his wrists is like bog oak, the ball of his heel like a basalt egg. His instep has shrunk cold as a swan's foot or a wet swamp root. His hips are the ridge and purse of a mussel, his spine an eel arrested under a glisten of mud. The head lifts, the chin is a visor raised above the vent of his slashed throat that has tanned and toughened. The cured wound opens inwards to a dark elderberry place. Who will say corpse to his vivid cast? Who will say body to his opaque repose? And his rusted hair, a mat unlikely as a fetus's. I first saw his twisted face in a photograph, a head and shoulder out of the peat, bruised like a forceps baby. But now he lies perfected in my memory, down to the red horn of his nails hung in the scales with beauty and atrocity, with the dying gall too quickly compassed on his shield, with the actual weight of each hooded victim slashed and dumped. Okay, so the main thing, or one of the main things in this poem, is the amount of metaphors. Seems to weep the black river of himself. Then we have a lot of similes. The grain of his wrist is like bog oak, the ball of his heel like a basalt egg, as a swan's foot. Back to metaphor here are the ridge and purse of a mussel, and there he's talking about the mussels that you eat, like Moulenfried. His spine and eel arrested, more metaphor. The head lifts, the chin is a visor raised above the vent of his slashed throat. The cured wound opens inwards to a dark elderberry place. And then we have all of these rhetorical questions. Who will say corpse to his vivid cast? Who will say body to his opaque repose? Because he looks so lifelike. So I just write rhetorical questions. And then we've got metaphor here. And simile. So you'll see that the metaphors that are used are all sort of animate things. The black river of himself, the ridge and purse of a mussel. If you imagine a mussel, if it's pursing its shell together, that is quite an active movement. And similarly, his spine and eel arrested. Whilst arrested here means kind of stuck, without movement, there is a sense that this is an eel, so it's a wiggly thing naturally. His chin is a visor raised above the vent of his slashed throat. There is a sense that every metaphor that this is perhaps an active things. That's what we shall put. Very scientific there, active things. So we get a sense of this Grauballe man as somebody who is still quite alive. Everything that is used for a simile is merely a comparative element. So it is although a swan's foot is an animate thing, a wet swamp root and a bog oak and a basalt egg are all things in nature that don't quite coincide with the humanity and the sort of activeness of this man. In fact, this imagery about him being full of life, his rusted hair, a mat unlikely as a fetus's. So he's saying that, this rusted hair on top of his head is as unlikely as seeing red hair, a complete head of red hair on a fetus. But it is also making this man seem like he is very much newborn, fresh. And we saw the pictures on the PowerPoint. These Grauballe men, or these kind of sacrifices, they do look like they've just gone to sleep and might wake up any minute. Then we get the I of the speaker come in here. I first saw his twisted face in a photograph, a head and shoulder out of the peat, bruised. Again, we have more imagery like a forceps baby. Forceps are, like if you imagine a big pair of tongs that are used to sometimes pull babies out of their mothers when they get stuck. So like a forceps baby, again aligning this Grauballe man with innocence, childhood and newness. What am I trying to write there? Newness, that's what we'll write. But now he lies perfected in my memory, down to the red horn of his nails, hung in the scales with beauty and atrocity. Lovely bit of internal rhyme there. With the dying Gaul too, strictly compassed on his shield. So he's buried with weapons, with the actual weight of each hooded victim slashed and dumped, because these were sacrifices. These interesting words here, slashed and dumped, they're very transactional and not careful at all, are they? Not careful imagery. This is the language of throwing something away. Like a life. We start off with what we might call in media res. As if he had been poured in tar. That's very important. Sorry, I could just see Mr. Hardwick at the corner there, and I was waving to him. But yes, as if he had been poured in tar, he lies on a pillow of turf. So almost as if he's been sculpted, this man. So this is all about the brutality of man to man, and the fact that people can do this to each other and have done this to each other to, come up with these sort of sacrifices, these Grauballe men. And also the animation of this man preserved in peat and how lifelike he looks. And then again, we come back to this idea of incredulity at the cruelty of man. But I hope this has been useful, and I will now go on and do another one.